Justice Anderson, when you were growing up, was it your dream to be a Supreme Court justice, or was it something you just kind of fell into?
Again, you're asking fun questions. Did I always want to be a Supreme Court justice? Absolutely not. I'm a farm kid. I grew up milking cows, but about age 14, I decided I didn't want to milk cows the rest of my life. I was always interested in civics and government, and so I decided about then I wanted to be a lawyer. I thought that was a good way. My mother was a teacher, my dad a dairy farmer. No lawyers in the family. And, you have dreams and thoughts as a younger person, and I encouraged that. And I thought, maybe, become a state legislator or something involved in government or a local official. That's kind of what I thought about. Did not think about becoming a judge or a justice. As things developed in my career and the landscape in the state of Minnesota, basically, I thought, that was never going to happen. I would be involved, I was a school board member, continue to be active in my local community. But, and this is a good piece of advice to young people, my career would be marked by showing up for stuff. And, every time you show up, you have an experience and you learn some lessons, and that helps you for it. I showed up, ran for the school board, learned a lot of things in that position. And so then I showed up for Arnie Carlson's campaign for governor in 1990. He wasn't going to win. I figured as much, as that he was not going to be the one that the party nominated. But through a sequence of events that I was a key player in, Arnie wound up on the ballot the Friday before the election, and he won the election by over 50,000 votes. All of a sudden now I'm close to somebody who is elected governor. But I will tell you, I have had the experience when Arnie lost the primary, and he told me when he had no chance of appointing me as a judge, it's a rare privilege. He said, "Paul, I regret that I will not have the opportunity to appoint you as a judge, because I think you would make a good judge." So I knew that he thought that I had the qualities even before he knew he had the opportunity to make the appointment. But no, but after Arnie got elected governor, all of a sudden people start mentioning who are the people close to the governor, and my name started popping up. But then he scrutinized me and decided that he would take a chance on me, and I hope it's turned out well.
Is being a justice on the Supreme Court, would most attorneys consider that to be the pinnacle of their career, just below being on the federal Supreme Court?
Again, fun question. There's a little bit of a hierarchy. Surely the U.S. Supreme Court would be the pinnacle of any justice's career. But people have different views of how they want to serve as a judge. I'm always been oriented towards state government. For me, then, short of the U.S. Supreme Court, being a Supreme Court justice on the state level is the pinnacle. It is really a good job. It's a good job. Other people who get tied to the federal system, and maybe they start as a federal prosecutor, as they start as a clerk to a federal judge, tend to be oriented towards the federal system, federal district court, federal court of appeals. And actually, my colleague, Alan Page, and I have had some discussion about it. He used to jog with President Clinton, and I'm sure that if he were interested in the federal court of appeals level, he would have had a real shot at it. He said, "Why do I want to be on an intermediate court of appeals that's correcting errors when I can be on the top policy-making court?" So it changes, your ambition changes a little bit on your orientation. I'm state-oriented, and for me, as being on a state Supreme Court is very, very special. And I consider myself one of the luckiest people in this country to serve, and to serve in Minnesota. Because people need to know that we're a special, special place. We got to work hard to preserve that special reputation. I told you that I had been in the Philippines and recently in Libya, in those places, I was working with people who were talking about how to structure free and fair elections, and also how to build a constitution, how to make a constitution. And there was, as you sit on a stage and you see the American flag behind you and realize it's there because of you, there's a great temptation to think there's something special about you. But I knew that I was there not because of me, but because of where I'm from. I'm from Minnesota. And Minnesota has this special reputation, not only nationally, but internationally, for how we run our government. And that's very, very special. And the people of Minnesota need to know that, but they need to know they got to work at preserving that reputation every day.
Do you find yourself frustrated once in a while at how some folks are attempting to preserve government in Minnesota?
We're having fun here, aren't we? You told me. You said not for me not to underestimate. You're going to ask some questions. But, I mean, you asked, do I get frustrated with the attitude of some people? Absolutely. And actually, part of my obligation is to give back. So while school's in session, I'm talking to groups of students at least once or twice a week, and I'm in schools. And I talk to them about this very question you asked. And I talk to them about Mark Twain, and talk about the role of the skeptics in our society, the comedian Mark Twain, when he was criticized by Matthew Arnold in the 1880s, responded and said, "A discriminating irreverence is the creator and protector of liberty." And because Matthew Arnold was criticizing his role as kind of the funny man and poking fun at, through humor, about some of the things that were wrong in our country, about lynching and about racial attitudes, whatever. So this is what I tell young people. You got to watch out for the cynics. I have very little tolerance for the cynics in our society who are just so strident on the far right or the far left. Their motivation is to turn most of us off, most of us to get so that we don't like either side and that we stay home and don't exercise the right to vote, because then, you hear the comment about energize your base. Well, if you energize your base and you turn off those in the center who you don't trust, is that then you're more likely to win the election. And so I'm to the point of saying these cynics are unpatriotic as to the way they are so critical and the way they want to make people sour about government. And so, yes, they frustrate me, and I'm more and more vocal about criticizing. On the flip side, you need people like Mark Twain who are skeptical. You need people who are questioning me all the time. That's what's kind of fun about this interview. You're not afraid to kind of ask some tough questions, because I need to have my feet held to the fire all the time. And I need to explain why I do what I do in the background for it. And so you should be skeptical of all your government officials and ask them why they do what they do, but not cynical. Not cynical. There are a lot of good people in government, a lot of people who are trying to do the right thing. But, we make mistakes, a fallible institution. So ask questions. Ask us to explain. But never become over to that cynical side where your purpose is to denigrate government or to denigrate the people unduly so that you turn people off. See, I'm going back to an earlier theme. Jefferson wrote about life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Now, John Locke talked about property. You had this dicey issue of slavery. But the concept of pursuit of happiness is not something that just happened. It comes from Aristotle. It's an Aristotelian concept that for a government to function, its main role is to provide the maximum opportunity for the maximum number of people to achieve happiness. Not everybody will, but government has a role. And so when you have these people who are so cynical and so anti, they're really, almost to my mind, unpatriotic, because they're not fulfilling the mandate that our founders had for our country, which is to provide the maximum opportunity for the maximum number of people to achieve a happy existence in our society. We've done pretty well, That's why, people talk about an immigrant problem. Why we have an immigrant issue? Well, people see us as the land of opportunity, a land where you legitimately can pursue happiness. And so I'm an optimist, and so that's why I'm not very tolerant of these cynics out there.
How many justices are on the Supreme Court? What's the structure of the Supreme Court? Because most of us out here in Minnesota may not know that.
There are 7 justices on the Minnesota Supreme Court. Used to be 9 at one time. Started out with 3. Some states have 5. Other states have 9. 7 seems to be a uniform number. It went up to 9 until the constitutional amendment, we talk about constitutional amendments, was passed in 1982 that created the Court of Appeals. Part of that amendment was the court would go down to 7. I like the number of 7. I've sat with 5, and I think the dynamic of 7 is better than the dynamic of 5. So why are there 7? Well, I'll give you a simple answer. I like to think that having one Paul Anderson on the Minnesota Supreme Court is a really pretty good idea, okay? But having 7 Paul Andersons on the Supreme Court would be a bad idea, because we need different perspectives. I mean, my life experience is different from what Alan Page's was, or it's different from Justice Gilday's, and surely it's going to be different than that of Mimi Wright, who's African-American, grew up in the segregated atmosphere of Norfolk, Virginia. And so we all have different backgrounds. And because we are the court of last resort, which I mean is that most cases in Minnesota stop at our court. The Supreme Court only takes one of our cases very seldom, maybe every half dozen years at most. And so we are the court of last resort, and you want those different opinions. And you get, a good discussion when you have 7 different opinions. And I enjoy what my colleagues contribute and where they come from, their perspectives. And the other thing is that about my colleagues on the court is that our atmosphere when we talk about a case, we allow each other to think out loud. We're tolerant of making mistakes. We're encouraging exploration. And so that dynamic of 7 is quite good. And it's good to have different people with different backgrounds.
What do you want to be remembered as? Maybe it's a little early. Maybe you haven't thought about that.
Oh, I'm starting to think about it. I want to remember as being a very conscientious, thoughtful justice. I want to remember for the manner in which I approached the law, and that I was faithful to the law, and that I was faithful to the Constitution. I mean, that's number one. I want to be remembered having written opinions that reflect that point of view, the respect I have for the Constitution and the law and the will of the people. I also want to be remembered as taking a fairly common sense approach, because when you get right down to it, what the law is, and when you talk about the common law, but the law is a codification of common sense for how we are to live together in a society. And I want to be remembered for that. One of our main functions on the court is to see that justice is done. But I have always said, and I've written opinions and mentioned this, State versus Strieff and others, to talk about, sometimes justice is the easier part of our job. Sometimes you have to focus on figuring out what's the right thing to do in the context of the overall picture of our legal constitutional democracy. And I want to be remembered as someone who always worked hard to make sure that I saw justice was done, and in the process I always focused on doing the right thing. What is the right thing to do? And then, of course, I would want to be remembered for my other work, getting out and educating the people. I do a lot of that, talking to groups, explaining how government works, because I'm so privileged to live in a society like we have.